And now, Jalen and Jacoby on ESPN Radio.
When I pop the trunk, head the deck.
When I pop that trunk, make everybody scream for the music.
Act stupid, I'll pop the trunk. Give me a boom.
Happy Friday, everybody. In for Jalen Rose, we have Mina Kimes. Thank you so much for doing the show today, Mina.
Thanks for having me.
I really appreciate it. Well, I'm so glad that you are here because we get to celebrate the new breakout quarterback star in the NFL. It is Nick Mullins. Patrick Mahomes who? Patrick Mahomes who? Look at Slick Nick here. That receiver might have been covered by a different defense, but that's one touchdown. Then here he is, another touchdown. And then it is another touchdown. This one to Kittle, who had himself a night. Clearly, I don't think he's like an MVP favorite right now, but he's definitely in the conversation. What did you see from Nick Mullins last night?
Some pretty easy passes. I don't want to throw cold water on this. I mean, the ones you featured were not very difficult. I think I saw Next Gen Stats from the NFL reported that he did not make a single tight window throw, which they define as 1 yard away from another defender, the entire game, and that has never happened over the course of this season. It's the first time it's happened, David.
Well, here's the thing. See, I know the Next Gen Stats, they're very good at what they do, but I do have to refute that. There was one tight window throw when there was two open 49ers receivers in the same place. So he had to fit it right in between them. So there was one that I remember, actually, from last night.
I also don't think I saw any Raiders defenders get close to him in particular.
That's fair.
Like, not a lot of pressure on that front. But look, I look forward to the Niners trading him back to New England, getting those Garoppolo picks back. Then the circle will be complete.
That makes perfect sense. Well, you did mention that the Raiders defense didn't look that good, and I didn't really see them in the backfield. I didn't see them in the secondary. I don't know where they were after the snap of the ball. But here's the thing. John Gruden's got it. There's no problem. Just listen to John Gruden in the future of the Raiders.
I see players after every game we play that, want to be Raiders. That's been the case my whole life. And I think the brand of the Raiders is an exciting one, and I think a lot of players, no doubt, do want to play for us in the future.
John Gruden says there's lots of players. Just his phone is blowing up, just sliding in his DMs. John Gruden, all these players want to play for the Raiders because the brand is strong. Mina, if you are an NFL football player, do you care about the brand or do you care about being, on a team that seems organized and good?
Well, first of all, notice he didn't say NFL players. He just said players are blowing up his phone, which that also triggered something for me because young people don't call these days, right? They would text him, right?
Great point.
They could have been rec players. They could have been
old player Warren Sapp.
Retired guys, which we know he has a fondness for old, men. Like, you gotta get into that statement a little bit. I cannot fathom at this point a free agent wanting to play for John Gruden, which is the problem with this whole scheme of rebuilding the team and trading away players and getting picks and having money to spend is people actually want to have to play for Oakland, and he has to be able to draft and develop guys. It's like the problem in the whole plan over there.
So he has, a 10-year contract with this franchise. Of those 10 years, how many do you think he's actually the head coach of the Raiders?
So nobody knows how much of that is actually guaranteed, right? Ostensibly, they're not going to throw $100 million down the hole. I would say he lasts at least a couple more years. They're going to give him a chance to execute the aforementioned tanking plan, which I don't have a lot of faith in him doing. But if he doesn't get better in a couple of years, I can't imagine they're going to want to go into Vegas with that situation in Gruden.
Absolutely. And again, he's supposed to be this quarterback guru. They scored 3 points last night against the 49ers, which isn't exactly the most stout defense in the league. It just doesn't. And Derek Carr, again, was like, I'm a Raider. I'm going to stay a Raider. Do you think Derek Carr's future is with the Silver and Black?
I do not. They've said he's part of the immediate future, right? And the way they've structured his contract, they can get rid of him pretty easily and save some money. But when watching last night, I was struck by, Derek Carr was under pressure the entire season, which is a huge step down from that offensive line that was really good a couple of years ago. But Derek Carr was also sacking himself. I mean, you saw him just repeatedly hitting the ground. And I couldn't help but think of his brother David and how he got sacked so much earlier in his career in Houston. It kind of ruined the rest of his NFL career, and I worry that might be happening to Derek, who, as you might remember, as recently as 2015 had an MVP caliber season.
Yep. Well, we're really losing sight of what's important here, which is Nick Mullins is the future of the NFL. I mean, Nick Mullins, an undrafted rookie, comes out and has a breakout night like this. And not only that, is we did a little research. One thing that happened during the game, which I found really interesting, Nick Mullins' Twitter was actually verified in the third quarter. Like, so someone at Twitter was like, wait a second, let me look this guy up. Oh, no blue check. Here's a blue check. So while we're checking out his social media, we did notice that he has a dog named Scout that we just have to show you. I mean, this is Nick Mullins' dog. Look at Scout. I mean, look at Scout, Mina. Look at that dog. I mean, is that not the dog of a future MVP quarterback?
This is amazing because when I saw that he had been verified the entire time, David, I was expecting him to get milkshake ducked, which is to say people were going to find like old, really offensive tweets from him, which is what happens anytime an athlete achieves immediate fame in 2018. But this is the opposite of that. They went back and found a cute dog tweet. That's
Look at
Nick
Scout.
Mullins, MVP. You heard it here first.
Well, you know me pretty well, Mina, and I have a tendency to go negative, and it's time for negative Jacoby. Okay. You're a big Seahawks fan.
I am.
A die-hard Seahawks fan, dedicated to the franchise.
Okay.
They're now 4-3. I have some bad news for you, Mina. It's not good coming up. I mean, look at these games. They're now 4-3. They're going to be 5-6 before you know it. The Chargers, the Rams in L.A., and then Green Bay, and then in Carolina. Mina, I'm not very high on the Seahawks' chances to make the playoffs. Can you, as a Seahawks fan, tell me how this is going to work for them over the next 4 weeks?
So it is a very difficult stretch of the schedule. You're right. But one advantage they have is between now and the rest of the season, they're playing most of their games at home. 2 of those games that you showed are at home. They do have a huge home field advantage in Seattle. And I don't think any of those teams, beyond sort of the Rams and the Saints, all of the rest of the good-ish NFC teams are kind of within the same range of each other, and I think any of those teams could be any of those teams. The Packers, the Panthers,
the Panthers
the
show up one week and they look like they're going to win the Super Bowl, and the next week they look like they're tanking. I've seen that. And
Seattle does look really good, in particular the offensive line that used to be coached by the guy who's now coaching that Raiders offensive line we saw last night. Tom Cable has taken a huge step forward. I don't know if you watched the last few games, but Russell Wilson is no longer running for his life, and it turns out, when he's not running for his life, he's phenomenal.
He can throw it. Yes,
he's one of the best quarterbacks in football. So I actually think they've got a pretty good shot at least taking 2 of those 4 games that you put up there.
We'll see. But when they're 5-6, I'm going to send you a text. Right now, it's time for News That Matters. Well, as you know, the Boston Red Sox are World Series champions. And one thing that's nice about winning the championship on the road is you get to go out on the road and then you come home and do the whole parade. So you get to party more. Well, what happened is some of these Red Sox on Sunday night, they went out to a place called Nightingale Plaza. I've never been to Nightingale Plaza. I'm sure it's a nice place. But what did they do? They got hammered. And they bought more booze than anyone should ever buy. Let's just take a look at what they purchased at this nightclub. 60 bottles of Moet, 48 bottles of Dom, 43 bottles of Ace of Spades, 17 bottles of Jack Daniels, 12 bottles of Perrier-Jouet. Yes, I'm going to read all this. 11 bottles of Jameson, 5 bottles of Veuve. 1 bottle of Cristal, 1 bottle of Don Julio, and they're like, you know what? I do need 1 bottle of vodka just to keep it mixed up. When you look at this, how could you possibly go through all of that, Mina Kimes?
My first question is, I don't know what half of those names are. Ace of Spades.
Ace of Spades.
Which clearly shows I'm not in the same playing field as the Red Sox. Also, 1 bottle of Cristal. How did they split that between the whole team? Who got the Cristal? David Price? All of it?
Well, I'm not a big champagne guy. I think champagne is way overrated. It's expensive. It doesn't get you that drunk. The bubbles give me a headache. It gives you a hangover. And also, it's not a good way to celebrate. It just seems delicate. I feel like shots of whiskey and beers is a much better way to celebrate than little, holding little glasses of champagne in your gigantic hands at a nightclub. Are you pro or anti-champagne?
No, I'm actually with you, which is why when they spray it on each other after the game and everyone's upset, oh, you're wasting good champagne. That's what champagne is for, the fizziness and the celebration. Yes. I don't want to, chug champagne after a win. It doesn't make any sense at all.
I did see some video that we couldn't clear from the party, and they're basically just spraying champagne all over the crowd at the nightclub. And I feel like the people that were at the nightclub before they got there were just partying, having a good time. And it was super fun that the Red Sox got there. But after 10 minutes of being sprayed with champagne, they were like, can we get back to just before, where we were just dancing and partying? Because this isn't fun anymore. And at the end of the night, Mina, It was a $300,000 tab. $300,000 tab. They tipped $195,000. $195,000. So it's about $500,000 total. I have a lot of questions about this, but how do you pay a $300,000
that's my question.
bill?
Right? You Venmo?
It doesn't work. Do you use the credit card? Does Amex cover that? Do you have to split it up the 4,000 ways? I don't know how this works.
Maybe you get one of those giant checks and present them to the bar.
Yes,
the Publishers Clearinghouse
also,
style.
$195,000 tip. If you're a server, you have to split that 4 ways. I don't think I'm coming to work on Monday. I really don't think I'm coming to work the next day after all of that.
Whose job is it, too, to keep track of that? And there's got to be some guy on the team who walks around, and that literally is his only job, is paying the giant bill and tip and calculating it.
Yeah, going to a pizza place with 3 friends gets annoying at the end of the night when you're trying to divvy up the bill. I can't imagine what JD Martinez and Mookie Betts and all of them at the end of the night. They're like, whoa, that was fun, but whoa.
Yes.
Whoa.
Yes, and then there's probably one of the Red Sox is JD was drinking all the Cristal, and I don't really feel like I should pay $35,000 for my shot. I was having the Bud Heavies. There's one guy.
I'm also super curious about the 17 bottles, or the 11 bottles of Jameson and 17 bottles of Jack Daniels. How do you drink that? How many people were at this nightclub? Is it just the 4 of them sitting around a table with 17 bottles of Jack Daniels? That just seems like a recipe for disaster and hospitalization. Baseball
teams aren't that big, also. So when you do the total bottles of liquor divided by the number of people, something here is not quite adding up.
The champagne, I get. You're spraying it on the crowd and everything. It's the whiskey when I start asking questions. After 16 bottles of Jack Daniels, who's you know what? Maybe just one more bottle of Jack Daniels. Just a nightcap bottle of whiskey. Maybe we should just do that.
Thank you so much for supporting Jalen and Jacoby. And help us support our sponsors. Here's the thing. The sponsors are very important to us. They keep us on the air. So we need you just to fill out a quick survey. It's super easy. All you have to do is go to podcast.study. Fill out a quick survey. It takes no time. It's really easy, and it really, really helps us out. Please do us the favor. Go to podcast.study. Fill out some information. Light work, no time. Help us give the people what they want. Thanks so much.
I can't believe it.
That Philip brought his little brother on our mission into orbit.
How long until we get there? How long until we get there? How long until we get there?
No, I can't believe how easy it was to save hundreds of dollars on my car insurance with Geico.
What's this button do? What's this button do? What's this button do? What's this button do?
Don't touch that! Believe it, Geico could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Mina, we're going to turn our attention to the National Basketball Association. Last night, big game in the Eastern Conference. The Eastern Conference has a few teams that could win the conference, and 2 of them played in Boston when they hosted the Bucks, who were previously undefeated, and now they have lost. The Celtics won a close game. Kyrie Irving played great. Gordon Hayward had a little bit of a bounce-back game. Giannis did Giannis things. Mina, what did you learn last night in the Eastern Conference in this matchup?
Is it weird that I came away more impressed with the Bucks, right? Because on a night when the Celtics, scored 24 three-pointers, almost beating the NBA record, they barely beat Milwaukee. And before the season, I think, when we were looking at the Eastern Conference Elite, we had, the Celtics, the Sixers, the Raptors, but I didn't really hear a lot of people talking about the Bucks. Meanwhile, this team comes out undefeated, longer than any other team in the NBA, and they look fantastic. They have an actual offensive system around Giannis, and I think this game, they're likely to win 3 out of 5 times.
I would love to do the sports media thing and disagree with you, but I totally agree. I came away from this more impressed with the Bucks as well. Giannis had a little lefty reverse layup that would have tied the game with under a minute left. They were very much in this. And as you mentioned, the Celtics were shooting the lights out. 24 made threes. And here's another thing that's concerning with me. For this whole season, I've had my eye on this. Gordon Hayward still doesn't really look like Gordon Hayward. Sure, he had 18 points and he shot well, but he only played in 27 minutes, and he talked after the game about how sore he felt and how he needs to land on that leg wrong. We're over a calendar year separated from his injury, and he still doesn't feel like he's 100% back. Are you concerned about Gordon Hayward as well?
I would say that's the upside for Boston, right? Is they've got players coming back online, so potentially by the end of the season, if they have this matchup again in the playoffs, you would think Gordon Hayward might be better than he's been, Kyrie as well, whereas Milwaukee, they could potentially be peaking a little too early. Alternatively, you could say, oh, wow, they're actually learning Mike Budenholzer's system now, and they'll be even better by the end of the season, which is terrifying given how good they've looked so far.
Absolutely. And like, it really does seem like the Bucks are more or less are putting out the same roster they had last year, but they've got Coach Bud now. And Coach Bud is clearly making a difference for this team. I'm very high on the Bucks. I would have them in the pecking order of the Eastern Conference. I would probably have them neck and neck with Boston number 1. And I know that's a little ridiculous to say, but I'm going to say it. It's what I do. Hot takes. Why not?
Just going to say it.
Well, and, the Western Conference is obviously sort of like a one-horse race, especially at this point in the season. So when Kevin Durant was asked about sort of who out there threatens the Warriors, like who do you see as a threat? He did the very political thing at first. And then finally, when he was cornered, he said the biggest threat to the Warriors is Boston. They've got a deep team. They've got a collection of talented scorers where it's going to be hard to switch guys on. They've got a big man in Horford who can facilitate like Draymond. Wow. They've got a great coach in Brad Stevens, a great atmosphere, a great home court advantage, and they've got a lot of length. Those are usually the teams that give us trouble. You've been working in sports media for a long time. You know how this works. Normally, players don't come out and say, you know what? This team would give us trouble. This one team. But unless you have the confidence of the Warriors, you've won 2 straight, you can kind of like get away with saying things like this. Are you surprised he singled out Boston? Or are you surprised he even answered the question honestly in the first place?
I'm surprised by how much I agree with his take, right? Like when he spelled it out, I felt myself being convinced by him, especially when he talked about the defense that they play. I was like, yeah, it's actually a really good point. As far as the actual take itself, I think, yeah, it makes a lot of sense, especially given how bad the Rockets have looked. It kind of feels likely that the best challenger to the Warriors might come out of the Eastern Conference, which would have sounded crazy before the season. But then you look at teams like the Bucks, like Boston, like what Toronto is doing, all of a sudden it kind of makes sense, and we might actually get a decent finals this year.
I'm looking forward to it, and something tells me the Warriors will be in those finals.
100%.
Well, we keep talking about these teams in the Eastern Conference, and one of them performed pretty well last night, and that was the 76ers. They were home playing the Clippers, and Joel Embiid had himself a night. He had 41 points. This is his 6th game with over 30 points and 10 rebounds. He had 5 all of last year. Do you think the Sixers have enough to compete with the Raptors and the Bucks and the Celtics in the Eastern Conference?
Sadly, I do not, because they need that kind of game out of Joel Embiid every time, especially against good teams, if they want to win, due to the absolute dearth of shooting beyond Joel Embiid. And you can't lean on your, 7-foot center every time to generate all of your offense. I mean, did you see the video of Markelle Fultz practicing his shots?
Yes.
The other day, not on the hoop. I mean, that's where the Sixers are. And so outside of Embiid, who's going to come through and be the guy on that team? It's great when he steps up and he does that and has that kind of production, but I don't think it's sustainable over the course of a season.
And it's also one of those things, like, when you get into the playoffs, obviously the rotation shrinks, but you just, like, right now they played last night Landry Shamet 23 minutes and Muscala 24 minutes. Like, that's not going to win you the Eastern Conference. Those are great players. God bless them. I hope they have great careers. But, like, that's not going to win you the Eastern Conference. I have a little concern about depth with the Sixers, and obviously health is always looming out there. Like, even now, after a full year almost of Embiid last year, I'm still concerned every time he falls down or every time something happens. Like, it's still like the scariest thing. Not that we would just lose him on the basketball court. We would lose his personality. We would lose his Twitter. We need him. We need him. We need him to be active, though. We need him to be relevant. If he's not playing, then he's not tweeting as well.
Yeah,
that's really what we need.
That's true.
Well, Mina, I don't do a lot of like sports prediction stuff because I'm bad at it. I don't really gamble for the same reason because I'm bad at it. But I have a prediction about this evening.
Let's hear it.
I'm predicting that Rage Jimmy Butler is going to ravage the Bay Area. Jimmy Butler, he rested in the last Timberwolves game. He picked out this game on the calendar. He knows all the eyeballs are going to be on him. It's a nationally televised game. He's basically auditioning for the rest of the league. He is going to go into Oakland. Now, they will lose the game, but I'm predicting Jimmy Butler scores 40 points, screams at his teammates, and then just walks out of the arena in uniform without even going back to the locker room, and then walks all the way back to Minnesota because he's so mad.
Walks all the way back to Minnesota because he's so mad.
I just made up that
That's
last
where
part.
You lost me. You had me, with the rage and the screaming, but then the walking, and it didn't really make sense in the narrative. I love this idea. I love this theory because everything Jimmy Butler does now is an addition. It is a performance for the rest of the league. And as I was watching, the Derrick Rose game and seeing what Kat was doing, the whole time I was thinking about Jimmy Butler seething watching his teammates playing well without him. That's where the T-Wolves are right now. It's all about Jimmy Butler.
This is what this man has done. He has said he doesn't want to work with his teammates. He has publicly sort of like trashed his teammates. He's not showed up to work. He showed up late, yelled at his boss, and somehow like I love him more because of it. Like I don't know how this happened.
He's living out every office worker's fantasy.
He is.
Everything
he really
you
is.
described is something I think about doing every day. Jimmy Butler is manifesting all of our hopes and dreams in the worst way. And winning. He looks incredible.
I know. It's the best. I love it so much, but not as much as I love this next story. I'm so excited to talk to you about this. There's a gentleman by the name of Tex, and he lives in New Mexico, and he was going on a jackrabbit hunt. That's what you do when you're named
Casual.
Tex. You live in New Mexico. And he's got a dog named Charlie. Things took a turn for the worst when his dog Charlie shot Tex. What? Yes. Tex is fine. He's recovering, but his dog shot him in the chest, which really just begs us to ask you the question, what would you do if your beloved dog Lenny shot you? Would you forgive Lenny?
I would be oh, what a good boy. How could you be angry at him? Look at that face.
If he shot you? What if Lenny shot you?
I mean, I would assume it was an accident. I would be so much more forgiving of Lenny if he shot me than if a human being did. What do we know about Tex? Like maybe he was a bad owner? Maybe he deserved it?
No, he said no. He's forgiven Charlie. He said Charlie's a good dog and that he didn't mean to. Same thing.
What kind of dog was Charlie? We know?
First of all, I don't like follow-up questions because I rarely do research, but I do know because I read this article. He's a Rottweiler, and he had two other hunting dogs with him too. Tex is a big dog guy.
I was thinking like a golden retriever. That's a gun joke. Sorry. I know. Can I come back?
Yes. Here we are on a Friday, heading into a huge football weekend. So we're going to preview some of the biggest games. There is no bigger game in college football than this one on Saturday night at 8 o'clock in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. LSU takes on Alabama. Mina, I have been to a night game in Baton Rouge, and let me tell you that not only have I not been to like a sports event with this type of energy, I've literally never had an experience in life that would match just the pandemonium, the intoxication, the rage, the sounds of Baton Rouge, Death Valley in a night game. Do you think that environment can take them over the top against what seems like an unbeatable Alabama team?
In a word, no. But I'm curious to see how hard they party despite losing and afterwards, because this Bama team, they're the Warriors of college football. Yeah. And I'm excited actually about the possibility that we might see them at least give them a little competition, that we might see Tua play in the fourth quarter, and that they'll actually have to try a little harder. But they're so much better than every other team right now, and it's not particularly close.
Yes, and then one thing I have learned, Mina, going to a lot of SEC football games is after the game, if you win, you celebrate with partying, and if you lose, you commiserate with partying. So don't worry about the LSU fans after the game. Somebody tells me that they will be fine. Moving on to a marquee matchup between two stars, the two best quarterbacks of NFL football going head-to-head in a night game on Sunday. It's Brady against Rodgers. Listen, this is like one of those kind of like low-hanging fruit debates that happen all the time in sports media, but now it's appropriate because they're actually playing each other. Mina Kimes, who is a better quarterback, Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers?
Aaron Rodgers is more talented. Tom Brady has obviously accomplished more, so he's the better quarterback. Is that an acceptable answer? Is that too nuanced? Am I not taking a hard enough?
Too nuanced? Please. That wasn't too nuanced. I'm saying right now, Mina, like if you had to win one football game and all the other variables were the exact same, coach, defense, skill positions, would you rather have Tom Brady under center or Aaron Rodgers?
Aaron Rodgers. And Brady himself has said if you put Brady said about Rodgers that if you put Rodgers in New England, he would have had like 7,000 yards a season or something crazy. He's obviously been given less to work with over the course of his career. I'm actually excited about this game beyond the quarterback matchup because the Packers played the Rams really hard last week, and
they did.
They do look like they're at least on the uptick a little bit, so it should be a good game, not just because GOAT versus GOAT.
The Brady Rodgers thing.
Yes.
Well, the thing when Brady did say that about Aaron Rodgers, the first thing that came to mind is like, this is the type of quote you give when you've won 1 million Super Bowls. You know,
yeah, you can be generous.
That's when you can say things like that. You can just be like, oh yeah, like that guy's great. He's one of the best. When you've won as many Super Bowls as Tom Brady, the compliments flow pretty freely to the competition. Yep. Moving on to the biggest game in football, not just because of the quarterbacks. This one is in the Superdome. Not too far from Baton Rouge, actually. So Saturday night will be the biggest game in college football. Sunday will be the biggest game in the NFL. The Saints host the Rams. I'm predicting the Rams lose this game. What do you think?
Me too. I also think they will, largely because it's in the Dome. The Saints are obviously the second best team in the NFC, but they're also improving at a rate, especially on defense. They came out really, really weak, as they often do at the beginning of the year, but they've looked better and better every game. Yep. I think if there is a team that is built to take off the Rams, to keep that offense off of the field in New Orleans, it's going to be the Saints. I feel like this is the Rams' probably biggest chance to lose a game between now and the rest of the season. Otherwise, they might go undefeated.
I mean, if you look at this undefeated team, like, it doesn't feel like we've talked about Alabama in college football. We've talked about the Warriors in the NBA. Like, this doesn't feel like the same sort of dominance. Like, even your Seahawks played them pretty well, came down to the end there. You saw what happened on Sunday against the Packers. Like, they've squeaked out a few wins. Like, this isn't like a dominant football team. So I would say that if they will lose this game, and if they don't, they will not be undefeated. Nope. We have a segment. It's called Is This Really Real? So I'll tell you something that's happening in the NFL, and you tell me if it's really real.
Okay.
Adam Thielen leads the NFL in receptions and yards. Adam Thielen is the best receiver in the NFL. Is this really real?
No. So he's the most productive receiver in the NFL. He's been the best receiver this year. And he's definitely in the top 6 or 7 because he was productive last year as well. But if I was starting a team from scratch to play a game next week, I would go for Antonio Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, Odell Beckham Jr., Julio Jones, all before I would grab Adam Thielen.
I think that's pretty fair. But what is it between him and Cousins? And even last year he was good too. Like, what is happening this year in Minnesota with Thielen where it just seems like he's always open in the end zone? Well,
Cousins hasn't been good, absolutely. But also he gets the benefit of playing with Stephon Diggs, right? Yes. Who draws a lot of attention from defenses. He also plays a lot out of the slot more than some of the other receivers I mentioned. So he tends to get easier matchups and he's open more often across the middle. He's a fantastic receiver. He's just not the best in the NFL.
So, I don't like to put my co-host on the spot, but we have a theory that Diggs and Thielen are the best receiver duo in the league.
You're right.
Could you disagree with that?
No, I don't at all. You're 100% right. The two of them combined as a 1-2 punch are, no question, far and away the best duo in the league.
Good. Moving on. The Texans have won 5 in a row and are definitely going to win the AFC South. Is this really real?
Yes, they're going to win the AFC South. That doesn't mean they're a competitive playoff team or particularly great. It's more of a reflection of the AFC South and how disappointing the Jaguars have been so far. Mm-hmm. But those 5 games, David, have been against pretty easy competition. And when you look at the rest of their schedule, it doesn't get that much harder. So as long as they can sustain the level of play and Deshaun Watson can, actually get on airplanes and fly to games because his ribs aren't broken, then yes, they should win the division.
That was a concern. Where they're like, oh, well, he's got this long rib things, and they're worried about the pressure in the flight. Like, what about the pressure from the opposing defense? What about the pressure from the air cabin is not what I'm concerned about. Concerned about the 350-pound dudes that are just trained to murder me. Moving on. Adrian Peterson rushed for 149 yards in Week 8, and he's back. He's a productive running back, and he deserves to be in the NFL, and he's just as good as he always was. Please say this is really real.
I'm going to say I have caught a huge L on this one. I thought he would be terrible. I thought he was over. I thought he was washed. I was wrong. Okay, now, he's not the best running back in the NFL. He's not even one of the 5 best running backs in the NFL, but is he productive? Is he good? Should he be starting on a team? Absolutely. He's proven a lot of people, other than myself, wrong this year.
Listen, I don't think anybody saw this coming, Mina. Like, don't feel bad.
Really?
No one saw this coming. After what happened with the Cardinals and the Saints, like, do you remember this? Not just, like, what he did on the field, but, like, what he was talking about, what he was saying, and, like, the way there's so much tension. It just seemed like this is a prototypical athlete sort of like on the way out at the end of their career, and no one saw this coming. Like, I mean, what are they doing with this offense to make him productive?
Well, the Redskins have a pretty good offensive line. At times, one of the better offensive lines in the league, especially when it comes to run blocking. So that helps a lot. And it helps playing with Alex Smith. He's been actually pretty good for them. I don't think he's been as good as Cousins in Minnesota, but it's a good situation for him. I mean, the Redskins are sneakily leading the division, right? They're one of which is weird because I don't think people think of them as being a contender or a particularly good team, and they've been winning ugly a lot. But guess what? Adrian Peterson's helping them win those ugly games.
Like, they're not just like sneaky winning the division. Like, they're like head and shoulders. I mean, if you think about the Eagles and the Cowboys and the Giants are barely a football team, but the Eagles and the Cowboys we both expected to be much, much better than this. And now the Redskins seem like the class of the NFC East, and I can't believe I just said that into a microphone.
No.
I can't believe I just said that.
I expect the Eagles to overtake them also before the season ends.
By the end of the year?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would make sense. Moving on, especially with Golden Tate. Todd Gurley leads the NFL in rushing yards and touchdowns, and he is going to be a running back most valuable player this year. Is this really real?
He's not the MVP. Look, he's fantastic, and he's by far the best running back in football. He also has the benefit of playing behind what I believe is the best offensive line in football, playing the lowest number of 8-man boxes in the NFL. He has it extremely easy. I don't know if you noticed, but he's wide open every time he catches the ball. But unfortunately, he's not the most valuable player. It's going to be a quarterback. If you took out Jared Goff, the team would suffer more than if you took out Todd Gurley. Now, Todd Gurley's better at his position than Jared Goff, but that's just the nature of the game.
Please tell me Patrick Mahomes is going to be the MVP. Please tell me Patrick
he's number
Mahomes
one right now for me.
Please tell me Patrick Mahomes is going to be the MVP. Yes, I love Patrick Mahomes so much. The Chargers. I have a thing for the Chargers. I like the Chargers this year. They've won 4 straight games. I'm going to say they're the second best team in the AFC. Is this really real?
No! Wait, so you've ostensibly got the Chiefs at number 1 because you have a brain. How are the Chargers better than the Patriots? I thought you were a Boston fan. That makes
I'm a die-easy fan. I turn my back on my teams all the time. I have no loyalty whatsoever, like when it comes to sports and just life in general.
Listen, I have ridden this train that you're on before many times. I've believed in the Chargers. I thought they were balanced. I thought they've had a great defense. I love Phillip Rivers. And I've been hurt over and over and over by this team. I refuse to believe. I think they're a good team. They're one of the most balanced teams in football, but there's no way they get past Kansas City or New England.
Finally, this is my favorite one. Undrafted rookie Nick Mullins threw for 262 yards and 3 touchdowns. He is clearly and obviously going to be the greatest to ever play the position. Is this really real?
No. He played the Raiders. Did you see? They put so little pressure on it. My Korean mother puts more pressure on me than that Raiders defense put on Nick Mullins last night. If you're watching, still sorry about that B+ mom. He had the easiest game of an NFL quarterback I've seen this season. He looked good, David, but is he the future? No.
Well, a couple things. Number one, I'm glad that your mom is getting a shout out. What's her name?
Sunmin.
Shout out.
Sunmin. And what was the B+ in?
It was in math.
And
I know, the doubly bad.
My mom is also happy at this episode because you're calling me David, and that's what she named me.
Is that
first time this ever happened on television? Now, Mina, we don't force topics on this show. Some things just aren't worth discussing. So we're going to let you decide. You decide if you want to talk about it or not with our segment, Keep It Moving. If you want to discuss the topic, just say hit the brakes. If you don't, me, you, and Method Man will keep it moving. Do you understand?
Got it.
Are you ready?
I think so.
Let's get it.
Ready as I'll be.
The Cleveland Cavaliers are in shambles. They're basically the Raiders of the NBA.
We got to talk about
Keep it moving or hit the brakes.
Hit the brakes.
We're going to hit the brakes.
No question.
All right. Well, we've got J.R. Smith is the latest headline to come out of Cleveland. And here we have J.R. doing what J.R. does. J.R. Smith is basically asking for a trade. He's spoken to reporters about getting a trade. They've taken him out of the rotation. He's going to be very difficult to trade. Like, how do you see this playing out over time?
I see them buying him out, right? Because he's barely playing. But there's something really quaint about this whole story. It's so old school in a way. A star who doesn't, or former star, if you can call him that, a veteran, shall we say. I'm downgrading him as the show goes on, who isn't getting a lot of playing time and was asked, do you want to leave? And he said, yeah. Meanwhile, you've got your Jimmy Butlers and your Kyries demanding trades even though their teams don't want to get rid of them, this feels like a fairly normal NBA story in some way.
It is. And there's also reports earlier this week that both J.R. Smith and Kyle Korver got emotional when they were told about their new role with the team. And when I translate the word emotional, it basically means they were screaming, they were throwing things, and they were very upset. Like, I think that there's a real thing going on between J.R. Smith and the front office with the Cavs that's not going to end well. And it just seems like it just kind of goes back to how valuable LeBron James is. Like, This is a team that went to the finals over and over and over again, and then you take out one human being from this equation, and the whole thing just falls apart.
Right.
Like, LeBron James is he keeps everything together.
And we all know how this ends for JR. What is his obvious destination is the meme team. And when the meme team came together, it was kind of crazy that JR wasn't part of it to begin with, because he's the final meme to complete the meme team.
Yes, and I don't think there are too many GMs that are looking at J.R. Smith and saying, that's the $19 million move that I want to make that's going to take us over the top. Like, I definitely want to pay that guy $19 million this season, and he's going to really bring us to the championship. I don't think that's going to happen.
No.
Moving on. Fitzmagic will rise again. Keep it moving or hit the brakes.
Come, we've had this conversation so many times. Keep it moving.
We keep it moving.
Steve Kerr has brought the one and done to the NBA. Keep it moving or hit the brakes.
No, hit the brakes. I mean,
okay.
How ridiculous is this Warriors team that Boogie Cousins is just there? They might use him. I don't know. He's motivating our guys. Who knows? Yeah. It's just a bonus. We're talking about Boogie Cousins. That's insane.
That is what's happening in today's NBA. And Steve Kerr, this is what he had to say about Boogie's relationship with the team. We made no bones about it when we signed him. It's a one-year deal. We're not going to have money to sign him next year. He knows that. So we'd like to help us win a championship, and we'd like to help him get a contract next year somewhere else. This I find really interesting. This is kind of unprecedented.
Yeah.
For a head coach who doesn't make the personnel decisions, saying, you know what, he's not going to be on our team next year. If there's someone of a Boogie Cousins caliber, you just don't do this. I've never seen this before. But there's also another layer to this, Ms. Kimes. Let me explain. They might have the money to sign him if Kevin Durant isn't on the team. Like, that's kind of what the subtext to this is.
Yeah.
The subtext of this is Steve Kerr saying, we're going to have the same core that we had last year next year. Like, if Kevin Durant leaves, then that does open up a max spot for Boogie Cousins. So this is also like a Jedi mind trick that Kerr is playing on the media and Kevin Durant, assuming that Durant's there next year.
I love that the only uncertainty of the Warriors is whether or not Kevin Durant is going to resign next season. When we talk about the team, that's the only thing that's up for debate. I mean, you're right, though. This is really unusual that he's being so honest. It would be like if Bill Belichick, every time the Patriots did this is something they do all the time, said, oh, yeah, Darrelle Revis, he's not coming back. We're just renting him for the Super Bowl. Oh, yeah, we're going to the Super Bowl. It's going to happen again.
Yep. Yes, which probably is going to happen again
Sadly.
with the Patriots, unfortunately.
You said the Chargers.
Yeah, that's right. The Chargers, that's my team. Floyd Mayweather could be going to the UFC. Keep it moving. Keep it moving.
We keep it moving. We keep it moving.
Danny Amendola has been in the news not for his play on the field. Keep it moving or hit the brakes.
Kind of want to hear about this.
I know. I don't really like. It's one of those things where it's like, this is a guilty pleasure story. Like, we're serious journalists, right? This is a serious show, right? Olivia Culpo, who's a former Miss America, Miss Universe, something, was dating Danny Amendola. She is in Australia shooting like the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue. So when your girlfriend's, I don't know, halfway around the world, guess what Danny Amendola's up to? He's being photoed with a local Miami journalist being very flirtatious and touchy, and Miss Culpo then broke up with him. What do you think about all this?
I mean, he went to Miami. Like, this was, I don't want to say it was foreseeable, but when you sign with Miami, the chances of something like this happening increased more than if, let's say, Danny Amendola had been traded to Green Bay. I don't think I don't want to insult the lovely ladies of Green Bay, but something like this would be less likely to happen, I think.
Yeah, it's not about the females in Wisconsin. It's more about just like the attire and the vibe of Miami. The beach culture is what leads to this. You know what I mean? Like, they're not on the beach in Green Bay right now. I don't know what body of water the bay is on, but something tells me that they're not suntanning and putting on SPF 50 right now.
I love beach culture as a euphemism. That's something we got.
Yes.
You just got caught up in the beach culture.
Someone in the NFL claims they know how to fix the Browns. Keep it moving or hit the brakes.
I'd like to hear about this. Hit the brakes.
Well, Hugh Jackson is doing the thing that some people that are just relieved of their jobs do, which is like you make the media rounds just to kind of like own the story and own the narrative. And here's what he had to say. Let's listen to what Hugh Jackson had to say. He said, quote, "You look at our numbers with me calling the offense with less talent. Our numbers this year were the same or worse than our numbers last year with better players on offense. So it was already tough for me to give up play calling when I knew more talent was on the way with John Dorsey on board. Of course, I wanted to remind everybody what a Hugh Jackson-led offense looks like, but I felt they wanted me to focus on coaching the whole team and let someone else call the plays." So essentially what he's saying is the problem with the Browns was I let other people make decisions that were underneath me. Like, it translates to me what he's saying.
Dude. I mean, we're talking about a guy who was brought back after 2 of the worst seasons in NFL history. And we often wondered, what kind of personality does Hugh Jackson have? Like, what kind of confidence does this guy have? What kind of cojones to come back after that? Well, now we're seeing it because it's the same kind of guy who finally gets fired and then blames the team and goes out and says, oh, yeah, I wanted Wentz and Watson and Mahomes and I would have won. I mean, what is he doing with this? Like, what team is going to look at this guy and say, yes, that's the coach, that's the leader of men we want?
I also love that he thinks that he was fired prematurely. It's like, dude, you are 3-36-1. Let me say it again. You are 3-36-1. It's like, if you only just gave me more time. If you just gave me more time, I would have figured this out. We would have definitely had like 4 or 5 wins over the next 4 years. It would have been great.
Absolutely. It's a long cycle, you know?
Now, this is the podcast exclusive. We don't just rip off the audio from the television show for the podcast. We like to give our podcast listeners some exclusive content. And sometimes that content's a little too spicy for television.
Ooh, I don't know what we're talking about. I'm scared now.
O.J. Simpson. Are you familiar with him? Orenthal James Simpson?
I've heard of him.
Dressed up in a Halloween costume. And his Halloween costume was of a doctor.
Okay.
But this just shows you how like tone deaf O.J. Simpson is. A doctor who's a gynecologist.
Oh, no.
And the name is Dr. Seymour Bush. Like,
no.
OJ. All right. Let's not talk about whether or not you murdered those 2 people that you murdered, okay? But, like, you have to understand what the narrative is about you. You have to understand the filter through which people see you and just sort of, like, the reputation you have, just the stink that is on you from the last 2 decades. Like, why did he think this was a good idea?
I just got Dr. Seymour Bush. That just clicked in my mind.
Yeah.
So, sorry if I need a second there. Well, here's my question to you. What would be an acceptable costume for O.J. Simpson?
Staying home.
That
would be acceptable.
You can't partake in Halloween.
Maybe a mask. Something where we can't see your face.
At O.J. Simpson's house, though. Like, if you're like,
yes. I don't know. I don't know where O.J. lives now. I don't think he's in Brentwood anymore.
No, he didn't return to the same house. What a curious decision to not.
I loved the O.J. Simpson movie that Ezra did. Obviously, it was great. It won an Oscar.
Yep.
But the post, like that, the last chapter, like the Miami years, like whoa, those were dark, man.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, I didn't think it could get worse than like what I saw, but wow.
Yeah.
Those were dark.
What if O.J. did like a really cute, clever pun costume? Do you feel like the internet would embrace him?
I think this is what he thinks a cute, clever pun costume is, to be honest with you. I think that's what he did. But, like, what lady is at a party is like, oh, there's O.J. Simpson in a disgusting costume that's kind of like, you know, I would say a little misogynist.
Yes.
Let me go over there and just talk to him a little bit.
Yes.
That's how you open it up. And we've got another Too Hot for TV topic. You ready, Reggie? Hit the button.
Too hot for TV.
So the executives sometimes, you know how the executives at ESPN, they have like their TVs on in their office?
Mm-hmm.
So, but the executives would never listen to the podcast, especially the exclusive section of the podcast. So we have to talk about things that we wouldn't normally talk about.
Okay.
No. So I'm sure this person is a terrible person, right? I mean, they did get the death penalty at the end of the day. And we did a little bit of research. I think they murdered more than one person. But there was an inmate who was going to be electrocuted via electric chair. And the last thing that he said was, "Let's rock." You laughed. You're trying not to laugh, but you laughed. Soft move or boss move, dropping a "let's rock" right before they flip the switch on you.
I'm not weighing in on the character of the human being, but that is an unbelievably boss move.
I'm almost positive that they're a terrible human being. Like, I'm going to weigh in on the character blindly without doing research and just say they're a bad person. Like, they're a bad person, but it's a boss move. Just to look the dude in the eye and be like, let's rock this. Let's rock. It's just like a great thing to say because Let's Rock has this idea of like we're about to do something cool. You know what I mean? It's not like, hey, that was a great ride. It's like it's a kind of forward thinking, which is what I like about it. It's like let's rock.
Let's rock. Do you think he planned it? Like, do you think the whole time? You know how you plan your last meal. Do you think the whole the lead up to this? He was like, what should my last words be? What should my last words be?
First of all, not to go in on the death penalty because stick to sports. But do they still do the last meal thing? Do they still do that?
I assume so. I think that's more likely than the electric chair, right?
Like, can you just really ask for anything you want though? Like, I mean, anything?
Yes.
Like, what if we're going like international, Like, what if I would ask for something that's very difficult to prepare.
Ooh, yeah, like as a delay tactic. Like, excuse me, I want like uni from the coast of Japan.
Yes, exactly.
You can't kill me until you get the uni.
But that's just the first course. The second course is an ostrich egg that's poached.
Yes.
I would definitely do that. Mina, thank you so much for coming on and doing the show. You are one of our favorites. It means a lot to us. I know Jalen's going to be sad that he didn't get to work with you. Can you plug your podcast, please?
Sure. It is a once-a-week NFL podcast, The Mina Kimes Show, featuring Lenny.
Good. Does that mean you have an off-season? That's a good plan. So you're not going to be on during the off-season. That's smart. Good job.
Yeah. It's like being a teacher. You got to take summer vacations.
Exactly. Make sure you subscribe to The Mina Kimes Show. And we'll be back next week. Wack Harris.
We're not done. We're not done. Got to give the people time. Give people what they want.
They're my little guys. I love them.
Speaking of the Hobbits, let's talk about LeBron James.